Thomas Paine called America humanity's last best hope, not because it was some blatant random idea that America is just fundamentally great. It's that what America is trying to pull off is fundamentally impossible. The history of humanity is one of violence. The history of humanity is not one of peace. The history of humanity is the one of meeting words with the spear instead of a conversation. Disagreement is met with ethnic violence. So the notion that we're building a society of 330 million people and growing that is going to try and navigate some of its most pressing issues in one of the most changing and rapidly evolving times, that's a really awesome thing to pull off. And I think humanity would be better for it.
All right, so I'm Jackson. I'm going to be one of our incoming vice presidents of Bridge Davidson, and we're very grateful to have you guys all out here at our Bridge and DCI Why Deliberate event today. And so before we get into some introductions, we want to quickly go through what the event is going to look like tonight. We're going to have three main components. Our first component is going to be a deliberative debate with our lovely panelists over there. And then we'll have a chance for some audience Q&A, ask the tough questions like why deliberate and maybe belabor some of the things that they're about to talk about. And then after that, we'll have the opportunity for an interactive dialogue workshop with our wonderful Bridge team. And alongside that, we will also have the chance to indulge in some delicious Chipotle. And so get excited. Oh, there we go. Hey. All right, so okay, this is a little loud. We're good. So quickly, I want to introduce to those of you who don't know what Bridge is. I'll give a quick introduction. So Bridge is a nonpartisan, student-led organization that looks to bridge the political divides across college campuses. They currently have over 100 college chapters, and they are currently the fastest-growing student-led initiative across college campuses. And so they do this in a couple of ways. They host conversation spaces like this, but also just like student-led conversation spaces for a variety of topics. And they also bring in speakers for events, kind of like the other organizations on campus hold. But we really try to leverage our chapter connections and our speaker network for that. So stay tuned for that. And with that, I will hand it over to Madeline.
Hi, I'm Madeline. I'm going to be the chapter president of BridgeUSA at Davidson, and I'm really excited to launch this new chapter and become a part of an organization that now, like Jackson said, is all over the country and just increase opportunities for viewpoint diversity here, really give students more chances to talk with people across the political spectrum and learn about different viewpoints and some different opinions. So I'm really, really grateful for the Bridge team and Manu for coming here, and it's just such an honor to have you guys here. Great to promote our new chapter and get our name out there, and hopefully we can get some great participation this spring in discussions and maybe some other events. So I'm really excited.
Woo!
Yeah, so if you're interested at all in getting involved in this new BridgeUSA student chapter, certainly reach out to Madeline or Jackson, or I think Cameron, Casey also are involved, and there's a lot of other students who've expressed some interest. So I'm excited for it. Just by way of introduction, my name's Graham Bullock. I'm professor in political science here and also the faculty director of the Deliberative Citizenship Initiative, and I'm excited about having a BridgeUSA chapter on campus to complement the work of the DCI and to, in some ways be a kind of entry point into what the DCI is doing, and also something for our fellows to work on and contribute to after they complete their fellows program. And so really we can work together with them to foster efforts to bridge divides and have conversations about contentious topics among students and faculty and staff and community members. So I'm up here to actually introduce Manu Meel, who is our guest, along with several of his colleagues from BridgeUSA. Manu is the CEO of BridgeUSA, and he's really, and the founder of it, and he's really responsible for building this amazing network of, I think, over 120 chapters across the country on college campuses. And he's a real leader in the field. He's a great advocate for stretching ourselves, growing into comfort around discomfort, around efforts to engage with issues and topics that are hard, right? But that are really important. And he's been a great advocate nationally for this work, and I've known him for several years, and we're also have a UC Berkeley connection, and just really excited to have him here to share his thoughts. He's going to speak for a few minutes, and then we're going to have several Davidson students, as Jackson was saying, to join him on the stage to really kind of challenge him a little bit. These are students who are DCI fellows, and they're trained in how to be devil's advocates and how to channel and steelman perspectives that they may disagree with. And so they're going to be up here, they've coordinated, and they're going to have some questions for Manu about the big question of why deliberate? Why do this work, right? And explore the hesitations, the concerns that a lot of us have, especially right now in the world that we're in. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Manu Meel to the stage to share his thoughts.
Well, hello everybody, how we doing? I heard Steph Curry came from this school. That's like the one fact I know. So I was told Steph Curry came to Davidson, and I was like, got it, I'm locked in. It is awesome to be here. Let's just give a big round of applause for Dr. Bullock and the DCI fellows and everybody here for all their hard work. I should also say hello to the live stream, and Christian, I know the setup's a little different, so if I'm off frame, just let me know. It's a privilege to be here. I'm grateful to be here. Whenever we get the chance to launch a new chapter, we always take that opportunity because we learn a lot from different colleges, different students, different political moments. And I'll just say that the reason why we've picked the topic of why deliberate is because I think one of the best ways to build support for the work of dialogue and conversation is to actually discuss the merits and also the flaws of conversations. I know all of us have friends, peers, there's political leaders out there in the country. There's a lot of friction. There's a lot of reasons to not do this work. There's a lot of critique for it. And yet at the same time, I'm sitting in a room full of people that are now DCI and dialogue fellows and dialogue evangelists and hopefully some dialogue skeptics. But I'll just tell you that when we started this work in 2017, which was my freshman year at UC Berkeley, I was actually a pre-med student. Some of you all know this. My mom is still confused. She's like, what are you doing? And at this point, I'm like, honestly, it would have been easier to be a doctor, Mom, given some of the work that we do on college campuses. But essentially, what happened was February 2nd, 2017 was a day that changed the trajectory of my life. We had a speaker come to UC Berkeley named Milo Yiannopoulos. And some of you may know who Milo is, some of you may not, but he was sort of a provocateur, and he would show up to campus and he would stir the pot a little bit. And I distinctly remember I was walking back from my math seminar, and out there in the distance we heard protests, and there's helicopters flying overhead. Now this is Berkeley, so none of this is different. This is sort of all par for the course, all right, another protest on campus. And yet we walked past a cafe, and inside the window was broken in. There's a screen that said CNN, UC Berkeley students protest free speech. And what was crazy about that moment was that the TV crew that was filming that, this woman named Kyung La, who's now a good friend of ours, and she's a correspondent at CNN, they were actually standing right next to me. And that was sort of the breaking of the fourth wall. That's where you went from feeling like, oh, I'm just, some rando student walking around to suddenly feeling like a participant. And that night was crazy because the narratives over that day and that evening and the next day were all about either students, hate free speech, students are incredibly violent, or students love a fascist regime and students love Donald Trump. And President Trump had just been elected a month after, so you can sort of understand why it was a little difficult and challenging at that moment, right? And yet, both of those narratives were missing something. And that was what most students on campus were frankly feeling, which was this is crazy. This is crazy. Not the protests, but the violence. What's crazy is that we live at a moment where people are so challenged that our democracy is at a point where we're unable to actually not only deliberate, but hear each other across lines of difference. And there was this majority of people, students on our campus, that felt that way that no one had heard from. And we'd called this the silent majority. And so the next day, me and some random people, we came on Sproul Plaza, and we started building a space for conversation. One of those people who's now my best friend is the co-founder of BridgeUSA. We were like, let's just have a conversation with the students. So we were like, let's invite the protested and the protesters into one room. Now, you should be thinking, that's an incredibly naive idea. Manu, after the largest protest in the history of Berkeley since the 60s, since Dr. King came to campus, you're going to invite groups of people that fundamentally hate each other, that everyone in the media would tell you are at odds, into a room, is like, go back to being a doctor. And I was like, all right. So we hosted that event. We called it Bridge Berkeley. 75 people showed up to that first event. 30 of them left in the first 3 minutes because they thought it was a civic architecture frat because the logo was literally a bridge. That's sort of like the level of amateur hour that we were starting at. And so we rehosted that conversation. And the following week, we had these students in a room. And the Berkeley administration was like, we don't want this to happen. By the way, 3 weeks ago, they actually rewarded us with the work of dialogue 9 years after that event. So one thing that they were very critical of in that moment, and I'll tell you why there's massive institutional changes happening. And man, that conversation was insane. Because everyone showed up in a room just like this, rounds, with all the critiques of conversation. It's like, my identity's on the line. I'm being challenged in a lot of different ways. I feel like I'm unable to actually be heard, whether you're a conservative or a liberal. And so my friend Ross was like, let's just lead with vulnerability. Like, tell me a little bit about your mom. Where are you from? Who are your siblings? Like, what actually drives you? Tell me about the human, not the Republican Manu Meel or the Democrat Manu Meel. If you're wondering, by the way, where I stand on the political spectrum, no one knows. You can Google it. Chat will say unidentified. So that conversation was fascinating because it demonstrated that we radically underestimate the power of listening, and we radically overestimate how divided we are. So how does that link into this broader conversation? Because right now, we live in a moment, whether you're on the left or the right, with all that's happening with, whether it's the Charlie Kirk assassination, whether it's ICE protests across the country, whether it's ICE raids, whether it's the question of the 2026 midterms, none of this work scales or matters if it can't address some of the hottest questions in the room. Does that make sense? Because oftentimes we have these conversations around dialogue and people say, this just exists in a vacuum. You can have your little conversation. The New York Times last year called this the Kumbaya Industrial Complex. I was like, at least we're not part of the military industrial complex, but I'll take it. Why do they call us the Kumbaya Industrial Complex? Because the idea is that you're building a political movement that is directly taking power away from one party or the other and channeling it into talking. Which, by the way, the founding fathers, in my view, would have said is the most American thing you could be doing. This idea that we live in one of the most divided times in American history. Imagine I told you there's a society out there with 330 million people, all of whom look differently than each other, heavily armed, trying to have a conversation about the future of our country. That is aspirational. America is an awesome aberration. It's not meant to exist. And the work of conversation, the work of dialogue, what our college students have done across the country is the fastest growing student movement in the country, one that is now rivaling some of the largest organizations that you've heard of in the news, is this fact that conversation is now the counterculture. Conversation is now the counterculture. When we started in 2017, the norm was let's listen to each other.